Demai, Perek Dalid, Mishnah Vav. This Mishnah we're going to talk about, and then this Mishnah and the next one, who can you trust and who can't you trust when you come to a new city? Again, there's a lot of contemporary issues. For example, you come to a new city. My wife and I last year went to Prague. You go to a new city and you're like, what can you eat and what can't you eat? And some people say you can't eat anything, and some people say you can rely on this hashkacha, not on that hashkacha. So basically you know nothing. What do you do when you come into a new city? You know nothing, you don't know anyone, who can you trust? Says the Mishnah, Hanichnas la'ir, ve'ino makir shamadam. You come into a city and you don't recognize anyone, you don't know anyone there. Amar. Mikan ne'eman, mikan me'aser. So you say, you go to the town, you go to the shuk, and you say, who is ne'eman, who is me'aser? Now, if you think about how, in this context, how fortunate we are in so many cities that there's hashkacha, and then you ask who you can trust, and now there's the internet, and you can text your rabbi. Back then, you had none of that. You just, who's ne'eman? Amar lo echad ani, eino ne'eman. So a person says, I am, he's not ne'eman. Why? Because a person has no ne'emanut on himself, and he has a financial vested interest in saying that he is ne'eman. Amar lo ish ploni ne'eman, harei ze ne'eman. But if somebody says, go to Yasala, ish ploni ne'eman, he is ne'eman, harei ze ne'eman, then he is ne'eman. Let's look at the bartenura for a second. Ish ploni ne'eman, avagav delo ha'ro'i la'amino, even though you shouldn't believe them, kevan dehu atzmo chashud, if he himself said, I am ne'eman, you wouldn't believe him. Nonetheless, kulahu shikilu ba'achsenai mishum chaye nefesh. Normally he doesn't have ne'emanut. But here Chazal said, what are you supposed to do? You're an achsenai, you're a guest, and chaye nefesh, you have to have a place to eat. You're supposed to, you can't trust anybody else. What are you supposed to do? The Kahati says, look at the Tosefta. So I'm going to bring the Tosefta for a second. Okay, the Tosefta says the following: two conditions. When is this true? Bisman she'ein makir sham adam. If you don't recognize anyone. Aval im haya makir sham adam. If you do know someone, lo yitol ela min mumche. Then you have to go to the person that you know, and you can only take from the mumche, from the person who is considered the mumche, the expert, from the person who is known as the trustworthy person. Today, I would say, it seems to me, that anywhere you go, you would say, Haya makir sham adam, because anywhere you go, you know someone who can tell you where you can buy food and where you can't buy food, who you could trust and who you can't. So it's hard to say unless you go to some really remote area that nobody knows anyone. Let's go back to our Mishnah. Okay, so the guy says, Ish plani ne'eman, go to One Stop Kosher. We had a store in Detroit called One Stop. Go to One Stop Fruit Station. Harei ze ne'eman. That guy is ne'eman, and he takes off Trumot and Masot. Halach lekach mimenu. So then he went back to One Stop and he bought from him. And he's at One Stop and he says to the guy Yasola, and he says, Yasola, mikan mocher yashan. Who here sells yashan? Now yashan, there's a number of different connotations for what yashan means. The first interpretation of yashan simply is tvu'ah yeshana, the Kahati says, which is older tvu'ah, i.e. more aged tvu'ah, which is better quality. So he says, who sells better quality? The only problem with this is, if you want better quality, when you go there, you can see if he sells better quality or not. It seems like you're asking him a question that you would need to trust him for. You would need to know whether he's reliable or not. So others say, hold on one second, miyashan, okay? So look at the bartenura. The bartenura says, sheyara shama yochlu chadash kodem shikrav haomer. Okay? So this yashan is not old produce, yashan, but rather it's yashan in terms of yashan and chadash vis-a-vis the halacha of omer, of the korban omer. So just to understand this, we'll take a brief pause for a second. Okay, just to understand what chadash and yashan is, we're just going to see for a second, we're in Vayikra Perek Chaf Gimel. Vayikra Perek Chaf Gimel. Okay, it just so happens that as I'm recording this, we're on Erev Shabbat, which is Erev Shavuot. So this is very relevant to us. Daber b'nei Yisrael, amatem hi tavo'u la'aretz asher ani noten lechem. You come to the land, uketzartem et k'tzira, v'aveitem et omer reishi k'tzirchem et achon. You have to bring the korban ha'omer. Ve'eniv et ha'omer lifnei Hashem le'tzonchem mimacharat haShabbat, the day after haShabbat. In this context, Chazal say, we'll learn in many later Mishnayot that mimacharat haShabbat means the day after the first day of Pesach. Yinifenu hakohen. You should yinifenu, wave it. V'asitem b'yom hanifchem et ha'omer, on the day that you wave the korban ha'omer, keves tamim shnato le'olah, uminchato, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so until you, velechem vekarli vecharmel, bread, roasted grain, carmel and grain, lo tochlu ad etzem hayom hazeh, ad aviachem korban alochem. You may not eat grain that has been grown in the previous year until you bring this aviachem korban Hashem, until you bring the korban haomer. Chukat olam l'doreitim b'chol mashvotechem. That is a law of God. That's called yashan and chadash. Yashan is any grain that was grown in the year, and now it's after the korban haomer. So, for example, grain that was grown before Pesach of this year, now it's after Pesach, so the grain was already harvested when the Omer was brought. That's called Yashan. Now, grain that's grown, for example, now it's Shavuot. So any grain that's grown, let's say in this summer, and it's harvested and produced, it's all considered Chadash until next year. And the halacha is, it seems to be a din d'oraita. It's a big machloket whether it applies in Chutz La'aretz or not, but in Eretz Yisrael, seems to be clear that it's a din d'oraita. Lechem v'kali v'charmel lo tochlu chukat olam d'oraitechem. It's assumed d'oraita to eat what's called chadash. Chadash, you ever heard the term? It's a phrase, chadash asur min haTorah. That phrase was attributed to the Chazon Ish, but he was only borrowing the term from the halacha of chadash. So therefore, it's since it's asur to eat chadash, you came in amalo mikan mocher yashan. Who here eats yashan? Who is selling yashan, old grain? In America, this is very relevant because many kashrut organizations, most of them, are not makpid between chadash and yashan. It was a practice that was quite common throughout much of the Gola, based on tremendous kulot of the Beit Chadash. They were accepted kulot. Actually, I personally believe now that there's no reason why the OU can't use its kashrut muscle in order to create a hechsher called yashan, to avoid people eating chadash. There's no reason why they can't do it. I think they should. Nonetheless, the person walks into the city and says, who here sells yashan? He didn't walk into the city. I'm sorry. He's at One Stop Kosher. The reason he can trust the guy at One Stop Kosher is because the Eino Ne'eman person said, yeah, go to Yankel, One Stop Kosher, buy your fruit from him. So now the only reason I trust him because an Eino Ne'eman told me to trust him. So I said to the Eino Ne'eman, the person who's really not Ne'eman, who I'm trusting because I have no choice, who sells yashan? Amarlo, he says, Misha shlachacha etzli. The guy who sent you back to me, the guy who sent you to me, the Yankel that you didn't trust in the first place, he's the guy that sells yashan. Even though it seems like they make a deal with each other, they are gomlim, they are helping one another. Tell you what, I'll send you people, but you send me back people. Harei elu ne'emanim. They are reliable. Why are they reliable? I think the reason why they're reliable, first and foremost, is the second guy, you don't know, the second guy doesn't know that you're going to ask him for advice. That's first of all. The Kahanti says they're ne'emanim. Why? Similarly, just like you can rely on the first person, you can rely on the second person. The first one you can rely upon because it's chaye nefesh, you have no choice, you're a guest. So too, for the similar reason, you can rely on the second one as well. We're going to see, so this is a case where even though it looks like they're working together, like there's some kind of deal between them going on, nonetheless, you can rely on them and purchase one from another. I want to go back and just point out that to suggest that the problem is chadash and yashan is also problematic. Why? Because the Amei Haaretz were generally not chashud on Chadash and Yashan. Most Amei Haaretz, many Amei Haaretz took off Chadash and Yashan. So it's a little unclear why you would think that it's Isur Chadash, but there is no really good solution to that problem. It really makes sense in the context because the Mishnah really is interested in knowing, if you trust A, can you trust B? So you wouldn't ask the same question, who now sells Peirot Metukanim? So the Mishnah had to ask a different question. So it turned it into Chadash and Yashan, like the Bartanura explained. It's just so that the Mishnah could get to the point of saying, even though they look like they're gomlim, like they're working together, Harei elu ne'emanim. Okay, I want to dedicate this learning, as always, to the memory of my father, Harav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. And if you have any comments or questions, rspolter@gmail.com. Have a great day.